people. Today we're going to be tackling the subject. It's a huge subject, monster of a subject, one could argue. NGOs, corporations, think tanks, Rand Corporation, and the Stanford Institute. These are hydras. They are big monsters with many heads, many tentacles. You could call them a hydra, an octopus. And we do have a graphic to show you shortly. But why don't you go ahead and give us just a brief, simple explanation? What are these, with no coding, no BS, nothing? What are these institutes about?
Human husbandry.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
fascism.
Well, they're Swiss bank authority. They're departments of Swiss banks.
Yeah.
Want me to cut to the chase? It's centralized world governance, central governance, promulgated out of Geneva, Switzerland, and funded by banks in Basel, Switzerland, Zurich, and Zug. And so centralized finance, centralized military, supreme command, again in Geneva, with the United Nations and NATO. And also in Geneva, we have bank authority in the form of the World Bank Group and the International, and essentially Summit Partners, where Aaron was trained. One block from this location is where Stanley Wojcinski lived, and he was the department head for Stanford University of Physics Department, the physics department head, and his home had a garage, and in that garage they had two PhD students from Stanford, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who invented Google in the garage, where Stanley Wojcinski, who's a professor of physics, let them use the garage for, I think, $400 a month. And they built $1 trillion company in the garage. And then Stanley's daughter, Anne, married Sergey Brin. The company went public, and voila, billions are created. Stanley laughing all the way to the bank because his daughter just hit the jackpot in his garage that really belongs to Stanford. And this is at 232 Margarita Avenue, which is near Ravenswood Avenue and right off Middlefield Road, where Summit Partners is. You should know that Stanley Wojcinski also had another job for the Department of Energy to run the linear accelerator underground 1 mile tunnel under Sand Hill Road on the Stanford campus. So he's collecting multiple paychecks. One, he's an employee, a high-paid department head employee for the Department of Energy, and the other, he's getting a high paycheck from Stanford to be a department head of physics. His daughter has just hit the jackpot with Google. He's collecting rent from Sergey Brin and Larry Page to rent the garage. And he undoubtedly is getting consulting fees and board meeting stipends.
But this is almost a bloodline thing. There's no room for participation. This is not something you can go and participate in. There's no democratic principles in any of these institutes. And you're lucky if you make it into one of these and you're not born into a bloodline. Because we've already established that these people's...
You have to have a connection. They're not going to let outsiders in to this occult, this temple, the temple worship, temple worship of fascism and human augmentation, because it's groupthink, it's hive mentality. They all believe in COVID. They all believe in mandatory vaccines. They all believe in Agenda 2030. They all believe in one world governance out of Geneva, Switzerland. And they're all following their Omerta code of silence. They're happy to lie to the public, to bald-faced lie to the public. And then within their temple of worship, their satanic worship, they're all obedient drones with hive mentality. And there's no dissent. There's 100% agreement, universal thinking.
This right here is what came to mind. It says fact checkers, but at the same time, the people who are telling them what the facts are, people who are enamored with their own sets of biases, prejudices, agendas, presuppositions, and blind spots. Fact checkers or think tanks are individuals who use the political, religious, and philosophical lenses which frame their way of engaging questions of facticity in a manner that tips the hermeneutical scales in their own favor when applied to such questions. So this is very dogmatic, very much, because these are think tanks, but at the end of the day, whatever they think up is the right answer. Oh, it's always the right answer because they are have all this money and they have all these people who have got all these, and we're gonna get into that in a moment. All of these people who are on the boards.
Heard follow the science. That
Yeah,
is secret code for follow the dogma, obey your orders, follow your commands, obey directives, obey authority. That's what follow the science means.
human husbandry applies the agricultural definition of husbandry, the scientific management, milking, and selective breeding of livestock for maximum profit, to the systematic processing of the human herd within the digital enclosure of C40 smart cities. In this technocratic feedlot, populations are corralled into 15-minute containment zones, not for sustainability, but to facilitate the efficient harvesting of biodata and electromagnetic energy via the 7G body area network. The system reduces the sovereign human citizen to a biological asset, kept alive only as long as their economic yield exceeds their upkeep, after which they are discarded like spent dairy cattle. Fascism, the modern iteration of feudalism, described as an extreme authoritative, ultra nationalistic political ideology defined entirely by central bank authority. It subordinates the individual citizen interest to the perceived collective good of the nation or race, and is often cloaked falsely behind concepts like democracy or socialism. The fasci, which you'll find two of them right there in the House of Representatives, is the namesake, and the fasci represents the e pluribus unum.
And the strategic Hamlet program over Vietnam, and the packets of sending and receiving messaging of the internet. This is all having to do with the RAND Corporation. They're involved with electrical engineering, to human husbandry, to politics, to fake wars, to the Gulf of Tonkin invasion, to strategic electronic corridors in Vietnam, which we now have in every neighborhood in America. The science of the swarm, the terror swarm of civil unrest, that is the new enemy. The enemy is civil unrest and non-compliance, and people who do not agree with real ID, who do not comply, who do not consent. We will have a terror swarm to deal with civil disobedience. Go on.
Yeah, so this is very much of interest because this is what we're seeing going on right now. So I'll go ahead and read through the slide and then we can get some of our thoughts. The RAND Corporation pioneered the application of the information revolution to covert warfare and regime change. So the Insectoid Logic, RAND developed the concept of swarming, which is a military strategy based on the communication patterns of insect swarms. This involves using networked technologies such as mobile phones and social media to direct hand-picked leaders and spontaneous youth protesters to topple uncooperative governments. Color revolutions. This methodology was perfected in the removal of leaders like Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia and implemented in the Rose and Orange revolutions in Georgia and Ukraine. Domestic containment in 2008, the U.S. Army Strategic Studies Institute, drawing from these concepts, identified domestic economic shocks as a catalyst for widespread civil disobedience that would allow the Department of Defense to radically re-roll for domestic population control. Strangelove as the Bland Corporation. So why don't you explain that one? Because I've only seen little bits of the movie.
Well, as one of my foundational films, Wizard of Oz, Doctor Strangelove, The Swiss Conspiracy, 3 Days of the Condor, The International. These are, in my opinion, foundational films if you want to grasp how the matrix of mendacity really works, how it operates, how it entraps and enslaves the people who take, people like Andrea Mitchell seriously, or took Seymour Hersh seriously, or took, people like Rachel Madcow or Mike Wallace or Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather seriously, or Geraldo or Barbara Walters. Those are all fraudulent idolatry, straw people who have no original ideas on their own. Anyway, in this film, it's a prepper film. The star of the film is Peter Sellers, who was murdered at the Dorchester Hotel in the Mayfair district of London later on, across the street from where Cass Elliot was murdered. Anyway, Peter Sellers plays numerous characters. He plays an Air Force general who launches a nuclear strike against the Soviet Union. He also plays the president, the clueless president of the United States. He plays Dr. Strangelove himself. He also plays a Royal Air Force general who is trying to get the general to recall the squadron with the B-52 bombers with the nuclear bombs. So Peter Sellers plays four characters: a Royal Air Force general, and then Jack Ripper, he's United States Air Force NATO commander, who launches the strike against the Soviet Union, Russia. And he plays the clueless president of the United States. And he plays Dr. Strangelove, who is a German scientist, Nazi, who is awaiting the return of Adolf Hitler, who helps design the Doomsday Machine. The Doomsday Machine is a part of MAD, MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction, which is referred to as the Bland Corporation, invented this foolproof system that if the Russians had nuclear weapons and the Chinese had nuclear weapons and the NATO forces had nuclear weapons.
Even in the late 1940s and early 1950s, long before Sputnik, which was the satellite, the RAND project was secretly recommending to the U.S. government a major effort to design a human-made satellite that would take photographs from space and the rockets to put such a satellite into orbit. RAND was not the first think tank, but during the 1960s, it was the first to be regularly referred to as a think tank. Accordingly, RAND served as the prototype for the modern definition of that term. In the early 1990s, RAND established a European branch to serve clients across the public, private, and third sectors. That's a big deal, the third sectors.
Like Brussels, Belgium.
Yeah, including governments, charities, and corporations. RAND Europe is the European arm of RAND, and like its main branch, it is a non-profit policy research organization dedicated to improving decision-making through the evidence-based research and analysis. RAND Europe's stated mission is to improve policy and decision-making through rigorous, independent research. RAND Europe is incorporated in and has offices in Cambridge, The Hague, and Brussels. And that's the last slide.
Just to supplement that, you should know that the Stanford Research Institute International, SRII, is the latest incarnation name that they go by, SRII. Mm-hmm. And the RAND Corporation, they were created more or less within about a year of each other, back 1946, 47, 48. And they have equivalent amounts of employees. The RAND Corporation has 1,850 employees across about 13 offices worldwide. And SRII has 13 offices worldwide and 2,100 employees. The main difference is that the RAND Corporation has a university in New Orleans called the RAND Public Policy School, where you can get a diploma. And in the case of SRII, they're already a part of Stanford University. They're on Stanford-owned land that was granted after they booted the Ohlone Indians off. So they're already affiliated with the University of Stanford. But they have a corporation where they make weapons. And I provided a link in some of the footnotes. You'll find Snaroff Company is owned wholly by SRII, which creates an obvious conflict of interest where you're collecting consulting fees to advise governments of which weapons to buy. At the same time, you're making weapons that you're going to be